Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome to another video. It's my favourite time of the month again, like I say every time, where we get to talk about the 7 books I read in September and we get to pick my October TBR. Can't wait to talk about the books I read and give you my opinion and hopefully get some recommendations out of this video. Okay, so the beginning of the month I started with a couple of books given to me from Lacey, so they weren't on my TBR. I didn't even own them. They were definitely on my radar, but I didn't have them personally, so to get them from Lacey was a blessing in disguise, honestly. So the first book I read of the month was Phantasma by Kaylee Smith, which is the first book in this dark fantasy romance, and I rated this book a 4.25. This book is about two sisters, and when Ophelia's mother dies, her and her sister are left alone, and Ophelia is left to basically be the mother. And they live in this town, and Ophelia is very alone. She doesn't have friends. She's the weird girl. And then when one day Ophelia's sister goes missing, Ophelia has no choice but to enter this competition called Phantasma. Now in this competition, if you are in this competition, the only way out is really making a deal with the devil or winning. And she goes into this competition to find her sister, but in return she finds out a lot about her mum, about her father, about people just in general. She forms a bond with this ghost and called Blackwell, who is very charming, very not manipulative, but very charming in a way it could almost be seen as manipulative. He's very arrogant but attractive, and they quickly form a bond, and he quickly helps her get through Phantasma with him by her side. She knows that she shouldn't trust Blackwell, but the only way she really will get through Phantasma is if she does trust him, because everyone in the game is only there for themselves, whereas she's there to find her sister. In the end, she ends up finding her sister, but she also ends up finding a lot about her heart and Blackwell in general. And it just ends kind of happily, I guess, between Blackwell and Ophelia, but definitely room to learn more in the next book, which I assume you would. What I loved about this book was the game aspect. I haven't read too many dark fantasies, because in this book there's devils, there's ghosts, there's ghouls, there's all these different dark beings that you don't really read a lot about in other books. I've read books with demons and devils and things like that, but not too many, so it was good to have those in this book again, which I really enjoyed. But I can't wait to read the next one. But yeah, I ended up rating a 4.25. At the beginning it was definitely a 5-star read for me, but unfortunately the female main character I wasn't the biggest fan of. If anything, she really quite annoyed me. So that's what let this book down. I loved Blackwell, but she was just on my nerves. So I'm curious if I'll enjoy the second book more. But for this book, I rated it a 4.25. Now the next book I read was also for Lacey's video, and that was My Friends by Frederick Bachman, which I ended up rating a 5-star. I loved this book. I loved everything that it stood for. I loved the lessons in this book. I just loved how it wasn't just the typical surface level book. There was a lot more underneath that you were learning and that you could relate to, especially me. And because it's a lot of it is about art, but that's just surface level, the art part. It's really about friendship, it's about love, it's about overcoming things within yourself and in friendships. It's just a very good book full of lessons, which I loved. And I've wanted to read Frederick Bachman's books for so long, but I just hadn't gotten around to it. So I'm glad I've delved a bit into his writing now. Now this book is about a painting that a boy paints when he's younger, and in the corner of it there's tiny figures of 3 people that's sitting on the end of a pier. Now this is in art galleries. This ends up being a world famous painting. He ends up being world famous for his paintings, but it's one of those paintings where you can't really see the figures unless you're really looking at it, like really can see. And a young girl sees this painting and she can immediately see it, and from then on out it's like kind of like she's one of them because she can see it, and so few people see artwork like she does and like the artist does. So it goes into detail about the lives of this friendship group 25 years earlier and all the battles they were going through individually and trying to overcome together. And it's a group of, I think it was 3 boys and a girl, mainly the 3 boys in the beginning, and then the girl was like added towards later, but it's going between past and present tense, which a lot of the time I don't enjoy because I feel like it's not written well. But this one, it's almost like you couldn't really tell the past and present tense because they were actually so similar, because in the future, like the present tense, this girl called Louisa, who's 18, who saw the painting in the gallery, she's very similar to the characters when they were younger in the past tense. So it's kind of like she's a part of that friendship group to begin with, which is why I found like sometimes you couldn't even really tell if it was past or present. It's just a book about this friendship between these people, and he ends up, when he's younger, this boy ends up painting this painting because his friend wants him to get out of this town. He doesn't believe he belongs in this town. It's a very small town. They're just in the slums, kind of. That's how it's kind of described. I feel weird saying it, but it is kind of described like that, very like a fisherman's town, I think it is. All these individual friends have something going on in their life, but when they're together, it's kind of like that's forgotten. But basically, one of the friends entered him into an art competition because he wanted him to get out of this town. He didn't believe he deserved to be in this town, and he knew how talented he was. So then he entered this painting, and it kind of shot off from there, and he became the person he is now. But in the future, he ends up dying, and there's his closest friend is the one that ends up meeting Louisa, the 18-year-old, and they go on this adventure on a train to travel to give away this painting of the artist friend. And along the way you learn about her, and you learn why she is the way she is, and he discovers that she is very similar to his friends when he was younger. So it's kind of, yeah, it's like he's reliving his childhood through this girl. And I really enjoyed that because he's telling her about his childhood and she's telling him about hers, and they're like kind of meeting up like, wow, we actually have a lot of similarities. And he does realize, he's like, she's one of us. Like, she sees the paintings how we see it. She appreciates the things like we do. She's one of us. And that's kind of like the whole premise of the book. It's really, this book is so beautiful because it brings together art and friendship in such a beautiful light. And I loved learning not only about the friendship aspect, but the things it was saying about art I really resonated with, because I love art, I love painting, I love all those things. And some of the quotes in it were honestly the most beautiful quotes I've ever read in my life. Let me read a couple. These are quotes Lacey highlighted, but all the ones she highlighted, I personally highlighted as well, would have highlighted as well. I like this one. It says, art is a moment, art is being a reason, art is coping with being alive for one more week. Because it does help me live, honestly, when I paint. If you feel strange, like you don't belong anywhere, that's because you still have your wings. They're rubbing beneath your skin. What I hate most isn't that people die. What I hate most is that they're dead, that I'm alive without them. Which I feel like a lot of people would resonate with that one. It's hard to tell a story, any story, but it's almost impossible if it's your own. You always start at the wrong end, always say too much or too little, always miss the most important parts. I don't read too many male authors because I feel like a lot of the time I don't connect with their writing as much, but he is written by a woman. The things he was saying, I was like, it sounded like a woman was writing them. Almost every single sentence in this book could be a quote, which is insane when you're reading a book and you want to highlight every single thing that he's written. He just writes so beautifully, and in a way that can connect with you no matter what you're going through, and I really loved that about his writing. And I'm intrigued to see if in his other books it's similar in that regard. I just had nothing negative about this book. It has so many life lessons, and if you're not into art, don't let it fool you. It's really not overly about art. It is, but the way he's talking about art, he's really talking about friendship, which I enjoyed. And I just loved his writing, and I loved this book, and I rated it a 5-star. I loved it. The next book I read was a new book for me, and I was really intrigued to read it. I picked it up from a bookshop last month, and the reason I picked it up was purely off the cover. I love a thriller, but the only thrillers I've ever really read, minus a few, are Frida McFadden, and I wanted to delve a bit deeper into other authors and just see what kind of thriller books I like, because a lot of time with Frida McFadden books, they're quite predictable, not in a bad way, but because I've read a fair few of her books, they start to, like, I can kind of start to predict what she's going to write because I've read a fair few of her books. But I picked up The Couple Next Door by Shari Lapina, which I ended up rating a 4-star. I potentially could have rated this a bit more in the second half, but the first half of the book was quite, not slow necessarily, but the things that they were talking about was quite like repetitive, and we're going over the same things a fair few times. But this book is about a couple, what are their names? Anne and Marco? Yeah, Anne and Marco, who have a fresh newborn baby. I think she's a few months old. And one night they end up going to the next door neighbor's house, which the house is like wall on wall, that kind of house. They end up going there for drinks one night for the neighbor's birthday, but they leave the baby at home in her bassinet because the neighbors didn't want any children. Now, that wasn't Anne's preferred choice. She wanted to bring them, but she was told not to, and she believed that her baby would be fine in its crib because they were checking on their baby every half hour, every hour, like taking in turns and checking on her. So they believed that she'd be fine. But when they returned home, I think around 1 a.m, the baby was not in her crib, and she immediately panicked and immediately called the police, and obviously from there people were suspicious upon them because they left the child alone in a home in the middle of the night. That's not obviously going to look good regardless if you're guilty or not. That's just not going to look good. Now with this book, I'm probably going to give spoilers, and I apologize, but I feel like it's necessary. I'm just prefacing I'm going to give you the spoiler, okay? If you don't like spoilers, please skip ahead, that's fine. I personally love a spoiler, so. But basically from the beginning, the police were they weren't as suspicious of Anne. They were very suspicious of Marco. She was clearly distraught. She was clearly really like, what the hell has happened? Whereas he was kind of like more muted emotions. He didn't really show too much, which is fine. A lot of men wouldn't anyway. But they were immediately more suspicious of him in the beginning. That quickly changed when they found out a lot of things about her. She was on medication for postpartum depression. She had a lot of things in her past that seemed suspicious in regards to her daughter potentially being kidnapped. They're like things that they uncovered from her time at school and stuff made her seem like she was a bit crazy. So they found out those things, and then in turn they were a bit suspicious, and then maybe she could have killed her child potentially or whatnot. Now, they didn't actually know when the child went missing because they didn't know who to believe, but they quickly thought that the kid might have been killed because the mum had depression and she wouldn't have known, which you quickly learn that actually Anne has a lot of problems with blacking out. And I don't really know why it was medicate. It's like when she was younger, she used to black out a lot and be aggressive with people. That was her thing. So I don't know if she disclosed that to people. I think she disclosed that when she was breastfeeding her baby that night before she was kidnapped, that she blacked out at one point. So she wasn't sure if she killed her baby, basically. She didn't know because she blacked out. I'm not going to tell you what happened to the baby. Basically, Marco was very sus and potentially could have ended his marriage with what he did. I'm just going to say he was the one who organised the kidnapping. The husband was the one who organised the kidnapping so he could get money off her dad because they were really well off and had lots of money and were rich. So Marco did plan the kidnapping, but he was also not innocent in other regards. He was just... I didn't really like him, to be completely honest. There was just something always off about him, even when you found out what actually happened to the baby, because the kidnapping, him organising that, wasn't the only thing that happened. But even after that, he was just a bit weird. I don't know, something was off about him. But you find out other things, and he basically, I don't think he got charged with the kidnapping because I don't think it was it wasn't completely his fault. You find out that he was kind of coerced into doing it by someone else, which you find out. You find out a lot about her family, which I was shocked personally with. That's the thing about this book, the ending. I was flabbergasted. I was like, holy cow, this ending is insane. Like, the last pages, I was like, because they do get the baby back, but after they get the baby back, Anne does something to someone that I was like, what on earth? I thought it was just going to end peacefully with their baby back in their arms. It didn't. Anne went and got revenge in her own way, which I was shocked by, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they made a sequel to this book. Would really love to read some of her other books because I actually really enjoyed her writing. And that's why you pick up books from op shops even if you haven't heard anything, because that was amazing. Now, the next book I read was a 90-page book, so like a short story, I guess, and that is The Green Mile Part 3 by Stephen King. Now, take my rating of this with a grain of salt because it's Part 3 and I thought I could read it anyway, but I probably should have read the other books first, but I didn't have them, so I just wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. But I ended up rating this a 2 star, but like I said, take it with a grain of salt. Part 3, I would have enjoyed it more if I had read the other ones, obviously. And I've seen a lot of people rate this and say it's their favourite one out of them books. So what I say is you kind of got to ignore it. But it's basically about a man that's on death row called John Coffey, who is the brutal killer of 2 girls. And one of the guards, Paul, is kind of like discovering some things about him, and he's increasingly becoming more curious about this killer, and he's just wanting to delve a bit deeper into who he truly is. And Coffey ends up revealing something insane, and I'm pretty sure it will delve deeper into the next part. So I don't really have anything to say about this book. It's Stephen King, so obviously the writing's amazing, like, writing's really good. I've never read, I guess it's a book, like, I've never read one this short. It was literally only 90 pages, so I completed it in a day. But I don't even know, to be completely honest, if I would continue this series or even start it, because I don't know what the other books are like in this series. I do wonder why you didn't just put it in one book, because it would still be quite a short book, but that's just me personally. But yeah, I rated a 2 star, but again, don't really agree, don't listen to that rating fully because I haven't read the other ones in that series. The next book I read was Talking at Night by Claire Daverley, which I ended up rating it a 5 star, and I talked a bit about this in my reading vlog. If you haven't watched that, you should, where people chose how many pages I read a day. But this book I've had probably for a couple months now. It's really intimidated me because it doesn't have quotation marks, and I have read a few books in the past that didn't have quotation marks, and I was really let down because I found myself getting lost a lot of the time in the story because half the time I didn't know people were speaking, and if I did know they were speaking, I didn't know who was speaking. So I was really scared to read this because it doesn't have quotation marks. But like I said in my vlog, I loved the fact it didn't have quotation marks. If anything, it felt more personal and like I was kind of getting included in the story, which it just felt more personal. That's the best way I can describe it. But basically, this book is about Will and Rosie, who meet when they're teenagers. They're in the same year, and Will is one of Rosie's twin brother's friends. So that's kind of how they know each other. They one night kiss at a party, I believe it was, and that's kind of how the story starts, because he can't stop thinking about Rosie. He doesn't know who she is or anything really, but he can't stop thinking about her. But she's very like a stickler for rules, and she wants to do really well at school, and so she immediately says to him, I don't want anything like a relationship, I don't want to do anything like that with you because I want to focus on school, but when this is done and I've done all my tests and exams, maybe we can then talk. But he can't stay away, and they're really like the whole time forming this deeper bond, and he's like, I'm gonna wait for you. But he literally says, I'm gonna wait for you, and oh my god, that melted my heart, honestly. Oh, he meant it. He really meant it, because he does wait for her, and then just when you think they're about to get together, something tragic happens and they're both struggling with grief, and from there on out it's kind of strained their relationship, especially for a good year after that. They don't really speak. Yeah, it's just strained, and they find it really difficult to move on. But this book follows them throughout, like, it's got to be like 10 years plus, I'd say. 10 years? I think it'd be like 10 years. And they are always in touch, pretty much always, but they never are together. Right after the grief happened, they got together a little bit, but then decided it wasn't going to work, so then they went their separate ways again, and they didn't speak for years. Rosie ends up getting married to a guy that she meets at college. Will is in a long-term relationship with someone, but they always have a spot in their hearts for one another, and it's all very clear from the beginning that they're each other's one true love. And I did say this in my video as well, I don't condone obviously the like emotional cheating, I guess it is, but even his long-term girlfriend Wills knew that he was in love with Rosie, and I feel like Rosie's husband always knew as well, because he'd met Will, so I feel like he always knew. But Will, the man he is, honestly, they end up with, I'm going to give you spoilers as well for this. It's not really the biggest spoiler, but I'm going to. Rosie and her husband end up separating for a period of time, so then Rosie ends up coming back together with Will when he's not in a relationship, and they end up kind of like dating. They're like full on dating, like living together kind of, and like being like in a proper relationship, until one day Rosie's husband comes back and goes, I want to be back with you, I'm really unwell, like I'm sick, like I've got like cancer or something, I believe it was. And she's like, I've got to be there, he's my husband. So she leaves Will again. But you'd think Will would leave completely and be like, I can't be with, like, you've pushed me around too much now, like you're going back to your husband after you just been with me. But no, he actually looks after the husband when Rosie's at work and working and stuff, and he would take her husband to the hospital, and they actually form like a friendship. But then it still doesn't end up working between the husband and her, and when he's like better, they end up separating for good. And yeah, it basically just ends with Will and Rosie coming back together again. It's kind of up to your interpretation, like where they go from there, because they say they're going to be together, but like you don't see it happening, so it's like really up to interpretation. But in my mind, they live happily ever after. It kind of ends with a lot of self-discovery, and because after the marriage breakup, she doesn't get with Will immediately, which I was quite surprised about, to be honest, but she kind of self-discovers, and she goes and does all these things that she's always wanted to do, and so does he, and they like do all these things that they've always wanted to do, and then they come back together and they're better for it because they've lived a life they wanted to, and now they know that for certain they want to be with each other. So that's kind of how it ended, and I really enjoyed that. The only part of this book I hated was her mum, because I found her mum so incredibly just selfish and really only wanted Rosie to do anything to please the mum. And she had a weird thing about Rosie's weight, and like when she was in high school, she was like making her like work out constantly and lose a lot of weight, and you don't really delve too deep into that, but I just found that part of the storyline super strange. But it's very clear from the beginning that the mum wants like the the ideal perfect daughter, and that's just not Rosie, and she'll never live up to her mum's standards. So I just hated the mum. Not enough for me not to like the book, but yeah. One thing about this book, I was not expecting the grief plot to happen so quickly in the book, but it did. But yeah, I found so many beautiful quotes in this book as well. It's a very good lesson about how you can't give yourself fully to someone else unless you experience things that you want to experience, do things for yourself, and then maybe one day you can be who you need to be for someone else as well. And I really enjoyed that lesson in this book. So what quotes did I highlight in this? I think we have a path, but it doesn't change based on the decisions we make. It's a path that leads to the same place anyway. I need to listen to that more often. How can love be wrong? How can any kind of love be bad? And then this one I just found so beautiful. It says, laughter again between them, softer than rain, the cloth of their bookmarks. The man Will is, honestly. I don't want to shoot for things that bleed me dry anymore. I want things that fill me up, and I don't care what they are as long as you're there and I'm there with you. Which was really after they had done all their self-discovery and they came together and said that. This was the last quote I highlighted. It was on the last page, so you know it must be good. It says, there is only what happens, he tells her, what is and what isn't. Not only is the cover so cool, and the cover has so much meaning, it actually does, but I just found this book such a good, beautiful book, and it is full of a lot of life lessons as well, which I really loved. So I definitely would recommend this book to everyone. And if you are scared of the no quotation marks, don't fret. I was too, but it really isn't even an issue in this. But I rated it Talking at Night a 5-star. The next book I read was also in the vlog, and that was Saving Six by Chloe Walsh, which is the third book in the Boys of Tommen series, the universe. Now, this starts the story of two different characters, because in the first two, these two here, it was about Shannon Lynch and Johnny, and their kind of bond and their relationship and coming together. But this one is set, majority of it is set before those books, and it follows Joey Lynch, which is Shannon's older brother, and his relationship with Aoife Malloy, which is his like long-term friend turn relationship kind of thing. Now, I rated this book a 4.5. So I rated Binding 13 a 5-star and Keeping 13 a 4.5, and I feel like it's very on par with Keeping 13. Now, I don't know which couple I prefer. I think this couple has more depth to them. I feel like Johnny and Shannon have a lot of depth as well, but I just feel like, I don't know. It basically follows Joey throughout life, and it's known very quickly in the first books in this series how the Lynch family are being abused by the father, and they're really struggling and struggle to make ends meet, and they're just a big family full of trauma, abuse, just nothing really particularly good. And you very quickly learn that Joey is like the breadwinner. He's like kind of like the one holding the whole family together because their older brother left them. And it starts when I think he's like 12 years old, entering high school, and he meets Aoife for the first time. And from then on out, him and Aoife have this beautiful friendship where he's like her main savior. Like he protects her with everything, like no questions asked. And he's just very protective of her. He is so clearly infatuated and just in love with her in general. But pretty much the entire book, he doesn't want to be with her. He wants to be with her, but he doesn't want to subject her to such a shitty life in his eyes, because he's from a family that really nothing good ever happens there. He's constantly being beaten up by the dad. He's struggling with addiction. He's just self-sabotaging a lot because he doesn't think he deserves anything good in his life. And I feel like I know people like that, so it was like hard reading about it and going, like kind of connecting it to the personal world. And it's very clear from the get-go as well that Aoife's in love with him, and she's just not going to let him go that easily. They do end up getting together at one point, and it quickly is them like, we love each other, and their thing is like, they say I don't love you because they do really, and he's just really can't open up to people because he's scared of losing them, and he's scared to bring them into his world. And it's also really sad because she's so willing to help him with everything that she is kind of losing her spark as well, and she's trying to help him with addiction, but there's only so much you can do for an addict that doesn't want help. So that's kind of what she comes to terms with at the end of the book, and it doesn't end very happily, unfortunately. I know the next book is more joyous for them, but it's just really sad to watch someone clearly going through such a depressive time in their life, and you can so clearly tell that Joey's depressed, and I would be too. You're being abused. You can't really open up to anyone because you're scared of your being hurt. You're protecting your siblings because they're also being abused, but you are so in love with someone, but you know you can't be with them because you're going to impact their life in a negative way perhaps. So it's just like, he's so depressed, and you just know he's like wanting to scream like, someone help me, but just no one's there. And you hear a little bit about him in the first two books, but I really enjoyed just learning more about him, and I feel like he could be one of my favorite characters going forward. He's just so lovable, but you can just tell he's mentally drained, mentally struggling. Just everything in life is a struggle for him, which is really sad to read about. It really is. I know what happens in the next book, some of the things, and I'm really hoping like they just get an ounce of happiness together because they both deserve it. And yeah, I know these books are really heavy, but I think books sometimes need to be that way because these things happen in real world. Like sometimes you need to read about these things happening and go, oh shit, I am really lucky. And perhaps if you're reading and you can connect in a way, that could also be like, oh wow, shit. So like, I feel like people are weird about this series because it is so dark, it is so disturbing, which I get, it is. And especially if you've been through those things, you probably don't want to read about it again. But me personally, because I haven't been through a majority of these things in these books, so I'm reading it and going, oh, this is like so heartbreaking, but I think it needs to be read. Trigger warnings, obviously. It is about abuse, all those later books are about sexual assault and things like that. So obviously it's dark books, but sometimes that is necessary. But let me read you some of the quotes I highlighted. I'm not afraid of loving a boy, I'm afraid of losing myself in one. Which I do feel like I relate to. You shouldn't settle for comfortable. You shouldn't settle for anything less than being in love to the point of madness. The only person you should be settling for is the person who unsettles you the most. The person who drives you to the brink of suicide because he or she makes you feel so fucking much that you can't catch your breath or remotely function without them. And what's more is you won't want to. You won't want to breathe or feel or fucking function without them. That's how you know that it's a real relationship. Only when you're feeling the most discomfort you've ever felt in your entire life should you ever consider settling, because that's when you'll know you're in love, which sounds to me like a hell of a lot nicer way to live than settling for someone who you have nothing in common with because it's comfortable. Now that was like about her long-term boyfriend who did not treat her well at all, I might add. This is probably my favorite. I find it so beautiful. It says, she clung to me like I hung the goddamn moon. It's just so, that is really, it just describes them, I feel like, too. Now the final book I read for September was probably the worst book I could have ended off on. And I read Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, which I ended up rating a 2.75. Now, I'm not afraid to give a harsh rating. I'm not generally too harsh with books, but sometimes 2 and below and a bit above 2, but like not a 3 quite yet, is necessary, because sometimes a book's just not my kind of book. And unfortunately, that was this book, which I was surprised about, because from the blurb of this book, I was the most intrigued, especially out of this one and Gone Girl and Sharp Objects. I was definitely the most intrigued by this, so I was shocked that it's the one I rated the least. But this book is about Libby Day, who when she was 7 years old, she gave evidence that ended up sending her 15-year-old brother to jail, and he's been in there ever since. And I think it's like 20 or something years later, and he's still in jail. And this group of people basically contact Libby, and they're trying to convince her of his innocence. They don't believe he... They don't believe he murdered their mum and 2 sisters. Her evidence did end up putting him behind bars because she said that she saw him doing it, when in fact she heard what she thought was him doing it, but you don't actually know if it was him or not. So basically this group comes to her and is trying to convince her that he didn't. So then she in turn starts delving deeper into her family and finding out things about the mum and finding out things about Ben and just finding out things about the family that she didn't know and she probably never would have if that group didn't come to her. Yeah, she's just trying to discover if he's innocent or not, basically. And you learn he's kind of innocent, not really at the same time, but he kind of is. And you learn what actually happened the night her family was murdered. What I will say about this, I didn't like any of the characters. I really did not like her. I don't know why, but she just wasn't my kind of character. I didn't like her. It went a lot between past and present. It went between the night of the murder and then the present of her like learning things and stuff. I hated both. I felt in the past tense a lot of the things I was writing about were just unnecessary. I didn't really need to learn about him riding his bike to a shop or like something like that. Like I just didn't see the point in it. And then in the present, it was a lot of time just repeating the fact that she was at home alone and like sad and like scared of opening up and like things like that, which obviously, but it was just repeated so often that I just didn't enjoy either storyline. Obviously I enjoyed it towards the end more because you learn what's actually happened, but I just didn't find myself even wanting to reach for it. I probably would have read it a lot slower if I wasn't doing the video. I don't know if I'd recommend really any of her books, which is unfortunate, but I didn't really find myself enjoying any of them that much, but definitely this one the least. So I did end rating it 2.75, unfortunately. These were the 7 books I ended up reading in September. I had a pretty good month. Obviously every month you have some duds in there, and I had a couple this month, but some also all-time favourites, I would say. But now we're going to pick my October TBR, and I go away next month, so I already have books on my radar that I would love to read, but I'm just going to do the TBR, and hopefully in there I get to pick the ones I want to anyway. I'm just going to pick prompts this time, and hopefully the prompts I get I can go off and pick the books I was going to pick anyway. So first prompt is more than 500 pages, which I have the perfect book for that and I was wanting to read anyway, and that book is Kingdom of Ash, which is the final book in the Throne of Glass series, and this book is 980 pages. It's nearly 1,000 pages, this book, so it's well and truly over 500, and I'm just excited to finish the series, honestly, and you'll be surprised I'm picking this, I'm sure, but I'm gonna finish the tandem read by the beginning of next month, so I've got to get this one going before the end of the year. So this is the first book of my TBR, and that is Kingdom of Ash. Now, because I picked this, I think I'm only going to pick 4 more prompts, because I think I'm only going to be taking 5 books away with me. The next prompt. A cover you love. And I, again, have the perfect book for this, and I've wanted to read it since I got it the other day. And that is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. Now, again, it's about a man that works in an aquarium and forms a friendship with an octopus. From what I've heard it's a very good, beautiful book about life lessons and so on and so forth. And I can just see myself laying at the beach. Does it not look summery? So the second book on my TBR is Remarkably Bright Creatures, and I'm stoked with that, honestly. Third prompt. An author you love. Okay. Okay guys, I know now I only have read one of her books, and that was the first book in this series, which was Spark of the Everflame. But I loved Penn Cole's writing, and I found myself connecting to a lot of the things that she was saying. So I wanted to read this anyway, so I'm even more stoked now. This is over 500 pages too, of course it is. But this book is Glow of the Everflame, which is the second book in this series. I've heard this is a 5-star book for pretty much everyone that's read it, so I'm really intrigued to see if I'll really enjoy it. And again, can't wait to be reading this on my little holiday. And so this is my third book on my TBR. It's another thick one, so I probably should only take 4 books, but we're going to do another pick, obviously. But this is the third book in my TBR, Glow of the Everflame by Penn Cole. Next, a one-word title. I don't even know if I have. Oh, I do. This is really working out for me today, guys, because these are the books I wanted to read anyway. Like, I didn't know that that's what's going to happen when I did this, but this is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Now, I've only read like 1 or 2 of her other books. Wasn't the biggest fan because she doesn't use quotation marks, but I wanted to give her books and her writing another go and see if I enjoy it more. This was $6 as well, so if I don't enjoy it, it's not like I spent like $18 on a book. But I'm intrigued. I don't really know what it's about. I've heard very mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people hate it. But I mean, the cover's like pretty in itself, so... But I'm just intrigued to see if I'll enjoy her writing more, because I read her other book a long time ago, like years ago, so maybe I'll enjoy it more. But this is the 4th book on my October TBR, Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. We're picking one more book, and I'm not entirely sure what I'd pick, so this could really just go off the prompt. I have a few ideas, but I'm not sure. Probably should be a shorter book because I've got some thick ones there. A mystery / thriller. Okay, that one's good because I do have options that I would really love to read. I think right off the bat, these are my 2 options that I would like to read. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, which is about a woman that shot her husband. And I'm pretty sure she's just a patient, doesn't speak, and then you just learn things about her. I've wanted to read it for a while. I've read another one of their books. I quite honestly did not like it at all. So again, want to give the author a benefit of the doubt. Maybe I'll enjoy this more. I have heard a lot more things about this book, so that could be a good option. Or the second one I could read is The Maid by Nita Prose, which I picked up from the op shop as well. She just discovers a man dead in his hotel room, so I don't know like much about it, but it's more of a mystery, which I feel like this is probably more of a thriller, I'm guessing. I'm not entirely sure, but which one would I read? I think I'm gonna go with The Silent Patient. It is a new book for me on my TBR, but it's been on my want to read list for years. So I would love to give it a go and see if I enjoy it as much as other people have, and just give the author the benefit of the doubt, like I said. So the 5th book and final book on my October TBR is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Now, these are the 5 books on my October TBR, and I'm very excited about all of them because obviously I curated it myself. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and thank you for watching and letting me rant about my thoughts on all these books I loved and all the books I didn't like so much. Goodbye.